Ironic, isn't it? The people most likely to be called weak are often the ones carrying the heaviest emotional burdens. While others walk away from pain, they stay and try to understand it. While others protect themselves, they give another chance. While others close their hearts, they keep theirs open. Yet there comes a point when life pushes an empath into a darkness they never expected. A darkness created by betrayal, disappointment, manipulation, rejection, and emotional exhaustion. Most people believe this darkness destroys them. Most people assume that after enough heartbreak, an empath simply becomes another wounded soul trying to survive. But reality tells a different story. Hidden beneath the pain is a transformation few people ever notice. A transformation so powerful that the very people who once took advantage of the empath often become confused by what they see. Because the person standing before them no longer reacts the same way. The guilt no longer works. The manipulation no longer works. The emotional games no longer work. And that raises a fascinating question. What happens when an empath reaches the point where they can no longer be controlled by their own compassion? What awakens inside a person who has spent years giving, forgiving, understanding, and sacrificing, only to discover that not everyone deserves unlimited access to their heart? Most people think darkness destroys an empath. But what if the opposite is true? What if the greatest power an empath ever develops is born only after they have been broken? What if the pain they tried so hard to avoid becomes the very thing that reveals their hidden strength? Throughout history and psychology, there has been a lesser-known pattern that appears again and again. Some individuals do not become weaker after hardship. They become clearer. Their ability to see reality sharpens. Their awareness deepens. Their intuition becomes harder to ignore. Researchers studying human resilience have discovered that certain forms of emotional suffering can create profound personal growth. Not because pain is desirable, but because pain forces people to confront truths they once avoided. For empaths, this process can be even more dramatic. Their natural sensitivity, which once made them vulnerable, begins transforming into something entirely different, something stronger, something wiser, something far more difficult to deceive. In this video, you will discover the rare power that many broken empaths awaken after surviving emotional darkness. You will learn why betrayal often becomes a turning point rather than an ending. You will understand why some empaths become almost impossible to manipulate after certain experiences. You will discover the hidden psychological shift that changes the way they see relationships, trust, and human behavior forever. We will explore why emotional pain can sharpen perception, why boundaries suddenly become easier to enforce, and why the strongest empaths are often those who have endured the deepest wounds. You will also learn about a surprising truth that many people never realize until it is too late. The greatest danger for an empath is not their sensitivity. It is their tendency to ignore what their sensitivity is trying to tell them. Once that lesson is learned, everything changes. By the end of this video, you will understand why some of the calmest people are carrying the strongest minds, why some of the kindest people become the hardest to manipulate, and why the darkness that once threatened to break an empath often becomes the very thing that reveals their true power. The final insight may completely change the way you view emotional strength, because the rare ability we will discuss is not about becoming cold, distant, or uncaring. It is about learning how to see clearly without losing your compassion. It is about developing wisdom without losing your heart. It is about discovering that true strength is not found in how much pain a person can endure, but in what they become after enduring it. Many people talk about healing. Few talk about awakening. Many people focus on recovery. Few focus on transformation. And that transformation is exactly what makes the broken empath such a fascinating figure. Beneath the scars, beneath the disappointments, beneath the countless moments of emotional struggle, a hidden power is waiting to emerge. A power that cannot be taught in books. A power that cannot be gained through simple advice. A power earned through experience, awareness, and survival. So stay with us until the very end, because each part of this journey reveals another layer of the empath's transformation. And the final lesson explains why some people spend their entire lives searching for the strength that a broken empath eventually discovers within themselves. Welcome to our channel, where we explore the deeper truths of psychology, empathy, human behavior, and personal transformation. If these topics resonate with you, and you enjoy discovering insights that most people overlook, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and join our growing community. Now, let's uncover the rare power that only a broken empath awakens after surviving the darkness. Before an empath discovers their hidden strength, they almost always walk through a period of darkness that few people truly understand. From the outside, their life may appear normal. They may still smile. They may still help others. They may still show kindness and patience. But beneath the surface, a silent struggle is taking place. The very qualities that make an empath special often become the source of their deepest pain. An empath naturally looks for the good in people. Even when others notice warning signs, the empath tends to focus on potential. They focus on what a person could become instead of what that person consistently shows through their actions. They see the wounded child behind the angry adult. They see the insecurity behind the arrogance. They see the pain behind the harmful behavior. While this ability allows them to connect deeply with others, it also creates a dangerous blind spot. The empath becomes so focused on understanding people that they sometimes forget to protect themselves. They begin making excuses for behavior that should never be excused. They convince themselves that someone will change if they receive enough love. They believe patience will eventually solve problems that actually require accountability. They continue giving chances long after those chances have been earned. They continue hoping long after the evidence suggests they should walk away. This pattern rarely happens all at once. It develops slowly over time. At first, the empath may overlook a small lie because they want to believe the best in someone. Then they ignore a broken promise because everyone makes mistakes. Then they dismiss a moment of disrespect because perhaps the person was having a difficult day. One compromise leads to another. One excuse leads to another. Eventually, the empath finds themselves trapped in a cycle they never intended to enter. They keep investing emotional energy into people who repeatedly show them who they really are. The problem is not that the empath cannot see the truth. Deep down, they often sense it long before anyone else does. The problem is that their compassion convinces them to stay longer than they should. Their heart fights against the warnings their intuition is trying to send. Because empaths feel emotions so deeply, they often become emotional caretakers without even realizing it. They step into relationships determined to help, heal, support, and understand. They listen when nobody else listens. They stay when others leave. They offer comfort during difficult times. They sacrifice their own needs to make sure everyone around them feels valued. At first, this may seem admirable. In many ways, it is. But when kindness lacks boundaries, it can become a form of self-neglect. The empath becomes so focused on carrying the emotional weight of others that they forget their own limits exist. They start believing that being a good person means always being available. They believe love means endless sacrifice. They believe loyalty means staying no matter how much pain they experience. Unfortunately, not everyone values such generosity. Some people appreciate it, some people respect it, but others learn to depend on it in unhealthy ways. They begin taking without giving. They begin expecting without appreciating. They begin receiving support while offering very little in return. The empath slowly becomes trapped in one-sided relationships, where their emotional energy is treated like an unlimited resource. Every conversation revolves around someone else's problems. Every crisis becomes their responsibility. Every emotional burden finds its way onto their shoulders. Because empaths care deeply, they often convince themselves that this is normal. They tell themselves they are simply being supportive. They tell themselves they are doing the right thing. Meanwhile, their own emotional reserves continue shrinking. The disappointments begin accumulating quietly. One betrayal may not destroy an empath. One lie may not break them. One act of manipulation may not change them. But repeated experiences have a way of leaving marks. Every broken promise adds another layer of exhaustion. Every act of dishonesty creates another crack in their trust. Every instance of being taken for granted slowly erodes their faith in people. The empath starts noticing a painful pattern. They give their best to others, yet they often receive the least in return. They invest deeply in relationships, yet their efforts are frequently overlooked. They offer understanding to people who rarely try to understand them. The imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. As this pattern repeats, a subtle change begins taking place inside the empath. The disappointment is no longer directed solely toward others. It begins turning inward. They start questioning their own judgment. They wonder why they keep trusting the wrong people. They wonder why they continue ignoring red flags. They wonder why they always end up hurt despite their good intentions. The self-doubt grows stronger with each painful experience. Their confidence in their ability to read people begins fading. They stop trusting their instincts because their instincts seem to have led them into painful situations. What they fail to realize is that their instincts were often correct from the beginning. It was their refusal to act on those instincts that created the problem. This internal conflict becomes one of the darkest parts of the empath's journey. Losing trust in others is painful. Losing trust in yourself is devastating. The empath starts second-guessing every decision. Every relationship becomes confusing. Every interaction carries uncertainty. They wonder whether they are being too trusting or too suspicious, too forgiving or too harsh, too patient or too impatient. The clarity they once possessed begins disappearing beneath layers of emotional confusion. Their heart wants to believe in people. Their experiences warn them not to. They become trapped between hope and reality. During this stage, many empaths feel isolated, not because they are physically alone, but because few people understand what they are experiencing. Others may tell them to simply move on. Others may advise them to stop caring so much. Others may encourage them to become tougher. But these suggestions fail to address the real issue. The empath does not want to stop caring. Their ability to care is part of who they are. What they truly need is a way to care without destroying themselves in the process. Unfortunately, that lesson is often learned through pain rather than advice. As the emotional weight continues building, the empath eventually reaches a critical point. This moment does not always arrive dramatically. Sometimes it arrives quietly. Sometimes it appears after one final betrayal, one final disappointment, one final broken promise. The event itself may seem small to outsiders, but for the empath, it becomes the moment everything changes. It becomes the moment they can no longer ignore reality, the moment they can no longer explain away harmful behavior, the moment they can no longer convince themselves that endless sacrifice will eventually produce a different result. For years, the empath may have carried everyone's problems. They may have acted as the healer, the rescuer, the emotional support system. They may have believed it was their responsibility to fix situations that were never theirs to fix. But eventually, they reach a point where the burden becomes unbearable. They realize they cannot save people who refuse to save themselves. They realize they cannot heal those who are committed to their own destructive patterns. They realize they cannot force honesty, respect, or accountability into relationships where those qualities do not already exist. This realization feels painful because it challenges everything the empath once believed about themselves. The old identity begins collapsing. The version of them that always said yes begins disappearing. The version that constantly sacrificed their own needs starts fading away. The version that tolerated mistreatment in the name of compassion can no longer survive. This collapse often feels like a loss. In many ways, it is. The empath mourns the person they used to be. They mourn the innocence they once carried. They mourn the belief that kindness alone could solve every problem. Yet beneath that collapse, another process has already begun. While the old version is falling apart, a new version is quietly emerging. At first, the empath may not even recognize it. The changes are subtle. They begin paying closer attention. They become more observant. They stop rushing to defend people who consistently hurt them. They stop making excuses for behavior that clearly contradicts a person's words. Instead of focusing solely on intentions, they begin examining actions. Instead of listening only to promises, they begin noticing patterns. This is where the rare power starts awakening. It is not a supernatural ability. It is not emotional numbness. It is not bitterness. It is something far more valuable. It is discernment. Discernment allows the empath to see people clearly, not as they wish them to be, not as they hope they will become, but as they actually are. For the first time, they begin separating potential from reality. They stop falling in love with possibilities and start paying attention to facts. They notice consistency. They notice accountability. They notice effort. They notice character. Where they once ignored red flags, they now recognize them immediately. Where they once trusted words, they now trust behavior. Where they once focused on appearances, they now focus on intentions. The difference is profound. A person may speak beautifully, but the empath now asks whether their actions support their claims. A person may offer endless promises, but the empath now watches whether those promises are followed by meaningful change. A person presents symbols in caring, trustworthy or loyal. But the empath has learned that genuine character reveals itself through repeated behavior over time. This shift changes everything. Conversations begin feeling different. Relationships begin feeling different. Decisions begin feeling different. The empath no longer rushes to prove their loyalty. They no longer feel responsible for earning acceptance from everyone they meet. They stop viewing every troubled individual as a project that must be saved. They start recognizing that understanding someone does not require tolerating harmful behavior. They learn that compassion and boundaries can exist together. Most importantly, they stop fighting reality. Reality becomes their greatest teacher. Instead of asking who someone could become, they ask who that person consistently chooses to be. Instead of focusing on isolated moments, they focus on repeated patterns. Instead of allowing emotions to override judgment, they allow wisdom to guide their compassion. And with every painful lesson that once seemed meaningless, their vision becomes clearer and clearer. The darkness that once blinded them slowly becomes the very thing that teaches them how to see. One of the most fascinating changes that happens after an empath survives emotional darkness is the reaction it creates in other people, especially the people who once benefited from the empath's kindness, patience, and endless understanding. At first, they may not notice the change. The empath still appears calm. They still seem compassionate. They still speak with kindness. But beneath the surface, everything is different. The person who once absorbed every emotional burden without question has learned lessons that cannot be unlearned. And for manipulative people, this transformation can be deeply unsettling. Many manipulators depend on emotional access. They rely on predictable reactions. They rely on knowing exactly which emotional buttons to press and when to press them. Some use guilt, some use fear, some use confusion, some use sympathy. Their methods may differ, but the goal is often the same. They want influence. They want control. They want access to another person's emotions, because emotional access gives them power. As long as they can trigger guilt, they can keep someone feeling responsible. As long as they can trigger self-doubt, they can keep someone questioning themselves. As long as they can trigger fear of rejection, they can keep someone seeking approval. For years, many empaths become vulnerable to these tactics because they naturally care about how others feel. They do not want to hurt anyone. They do not want to disappoint anyone. They do not want to be viewed as selfish or uncaring. Because of this, they often carry responsibilities that do not belong to them. They apologize for problems they did not create. They feel guilty for setting healthy boundaries. They blame themselves for conflicts caused by someone else's behavior. Manipulative people quickly learn how to use these tendencies to their advantage. But everything changes after enough painful experiences. The broken empath begins noticing patterns. They start remembering how many times guilt was used to make them ignore their own needs. They start remembering how often their kindness was exploited. They start remembering the countless moments when they gave more than they received. These memories begin forming a new awareness. And once awareness arrives, manipulation becomes much harder to sustain. The first thing that stops working is guilt. In the past, a manipulative person could make the empath feel responsible for almost anything. If the manipulator was unhappy, the empath felt responsible. If the manipulator made a poor decision, the empath felt responsible. If the manipulator experienced consequences for their own actions, the empath often felt responsible. The empath carried burdens that were never theirs to carry. Now, the reaction is different. The empath pauses, they observe, they ask themselves an important question. Is this actually my responsibility? Many times, the answer is no. That single moment of awareness changes everything. Because guilt only works when someone accepts responsibility that does not belong to them. The broken empath no longer does that automatically. They have learned that caring about someone does not mean carrying their consequences. They have learned that compassion does not require self-sacrifice. They have learned that another person's emotions are not always their responsibility to manage. As a result, guilt begins losing its power. Another tactic that becomes ineffective is gaslighting. Gaslighting depends on confusion. It depends on making someone doubt their own perception of reality. A manipulative person may deny things they clearly did. They may rewrite events. They may twist facts. They may convince another person that their concerns are irrational or imaginary. For a long time, many empaths struggle against this because they naturally question themselves. They are willing to consider different perspectives. They are willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. They are willing to assume misunderstandings rather than malicious intent. But repeated exposure to deception eventually teaches a painful lesson. The empath learns to trust their observations. They learn that reality does not change simply because someone denies it. They learn that consistent behavior reveals truth more accurately than convincing words. This realization creates a powerful shift. The manipulator says one thing. The empath notices another. The manipulator offers excuses. The empath notices patterns. The manipulator creates confusion. The empath remains grounded in facts. Gaslighting becomes far less effective because the empath is no longer disconnected from their own perception. They stop abandoning their instincts. They stop dismissing their observations. They stop allowing someone else's version of reality to replace their own. The emotional games that once worked so easily also begin losing their influence. The silent treatments, the mixed signals, the attention followed by withdrawal. The sudden affection after mistreatment, the cycles of reward and punishment. These tactics depend on emotional dependency. They depend on keeping someone emotionally invested in gaining approval. But the broken empath has experienced enough disappointment to recognize these patterns. Instead of chasing clarity, they observe behavior. Instead of seeking validation, they step back. Instead of reacting immediately, they give themselves time to think. This calm response changes the entire dynamic. Many manipulators expect emotional reactions. They expect arguments, they expect pleading, they expect desperation. What they do not expect is calm observation. A calm person is difficult to control. A calm person notices details. A calm person creates space between emotion and reaction. A calm person cannot be easily pushed into making impulsive decisions. This is why the broken empath often appears completely different from the person they once were. Not because they have become cold, not because they have become cruel, but because they have learned the value of emotional self-control. Their silence is no longer weakness. Their patience is no longer submission. Their calmness is no longer confusion. It is awareness. And awareness changes power dynamics in ways many people never expect. The person who once needed explanations now trusts patterns. The person who once sought approval now trusts themselves. The person who once reacted emotionally now responds thoughtfully. The balance of power shifts. People who relied on manipulation begin feeling uncomfortable, not because the empath is attacking them, but because their old methods no longer produce the same results. The empath has become difficult to deceive, difficult to pressure, difficult to influence through emotional tactics. This transformation often introduces another remarkable strength, a quiet strength, a strength that rarely receives attention, a strength that develops slowly and silently, emotional resilience. This is one of the most valuable qualities a broken empath gains after surviving darkness. Before this transformation, many empaths unknowingly tie their emotional well-being to the opinions of others. They want to be understood. They want to be appreciated. They want harmony. They want acceptance. There is nothing wrong with these desires. They are deeply human desires. But problems begin when self-worth becomes dependent on external validation. The empath starts measuring their value through other people's reactions. Approval feels rewarding. Disapproval feels devastating. Praise creates confidence. Criticism creates self-doubt. As a result, spend enormous amounts of energy trying to maintain positive perceptions. They try to keep everyone happy. They try to avoid disappointing others. They try to prevent conflict whenever possible. Yet life eventually teaches them a difficult truth. No matter how kind they are, someone will misunderstand them. No matter how honest they are, someone will question their motives. No matter how much they give, someone will believe it is not enough. This realization feels painful at first, but it also creates freedom. The broken empath slowly stops seeking universal approval. They stop chasing acceptance from people who refuse to appreciate them. They stop exhausting themselves trying to control how others perceive them. For the first time, they begin focusing on something more important: inner peace. Peace becomes more valuable than popularity. Peace becomes more valuable than approval. Peace becomes more valuable than winning every argument or correcting every misunderstanding. This shift creates incredible emotional stability. The empath no longer feels compelled to explain themselves endlessly. They no longer feel obligated to defend every decision. They no longer panic when someone disagrees with them. Their confidence comes from self-awareness rather than external validation. And because of this, their emotional foundation becomes much stronger. The opinions of others still matter, but they no longer define reality. Criticism can be considered without becoming a personal crisis. Disagreement can exist without destroying self-worth. Misunderstanding can exist without creating emotional chaos. This resilience creates an inner strength that cannot be easily shaken. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this transformation is that the empath does not lose their heart. Many people assume strength requires becoming emotionally detached. They assume wisdom requires becoming cynical. They assume protection requires building walls around the heart. But authentic growth follows a different path. The empath does not become cold. They become selective. They still care deeply, but they care wisely. They still offer kindness, but they offer it where it is valued. They still support others, but they recognize that support should not require self-destruction. They still believe in people, but they no longer ignore reality in the process. Love remains part of who they are. Compassion remains part of who they are. Generosity remains part of who they are. The difference is that these qualities are now guided by wisdom. They understand that helping someone does not mean rescuing them from every consequence. They understand that loving someone does not mean tolerating harmful behavior. They understand that forgiveness does not require unlimited access. They understand that boundaries are not punishments. They are forms of self-respect. This is the mature version of empathy, an empathy strengthened by experience, an empathy protected by awareness, an empathy balanced by discernment. The darkness eventually teaches a lesson that changes everything. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your energy. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your time. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your heart, because compassion without boundaries eventually becomes self-destruction. And when empathy finally begins working alongside wisdom, a completely different version of strength emerges. One that protects kindness instead of sacrificing it. One that preserves compassion instead of exhausting it. One that allows the empath to remain who they truly are, while finally learning how to protect the very qualities that make them special. In the end, the darkness did not create the empath's power, it revealed it. The betrayal revealed discernment, the pain revealed strength, the disappointment revealed wisdom, the loss revealed self-worth. And the heartbreak revealed a truth that many people spend their entire lives searching for. An empath's greatest power is not their ability to feel deeply. It is their ability to survive what should have broken them and still keep their heart alive. The broken empath eventually discovers something unexpected. They were never becoming weaker. They were never losing themselves. They were never being destroyed. They were becoming whole. They were learning how to combine compassion with wisdom, kindness with boundaries, love with self-respect. And once that transformation happens, they become a force that can no longer be controlled by guilt, fear, or manipulation. Because true power is not found in changing who you are. It is found in finally seeing your worth clearly. Perhaps that is why the strongest empaths are often the ones who have walked through the deepest darkness, not because suffering made them special, but because it revealed the strength that was hidden inside them all along. If this message resonated with you, let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our future content. Share this video with someone who may need this message today. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the darkest chapter of your life is not the end of your story. It is the chapter where your true power finally awakens.